The November rain fell relentlessly on Nashville's streets, turning the asphalt into a mirror that reflected the neon signs of honky-tonk bars and the distant glow of the Grand Ole Opry. Daniel Crawford pulled his worn military jacket tighter around his shoulders as he sought shelter under the awning of a closed pawnshop on Lower Broadway. At 42, his weathered face told the story of 3 tours in Afghanistan, countless sleepless nights haunted by memories he couldn't shake, and 3 years of living on the streets of Music City. The sounds of live country music drifted from the nearby bars, mixing with the steady drumbeat of rain on concrete. Daniel's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning when the shelter served breakfast. His hands trembled slightly, not just from the cold, but from the withdrawal symptoms that had become his constant companion since he'd made the decision to get clean 2 weeks ago. The bottle of cheap whiskey he'd been nursing for months was finally empty, and this time he wasn't going to replace it. 6 blocks away, in the upscale Gulch neighborhood, Rebecca Williams sat at her kitchen table surrounded by a mountain of medical bills. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across the invoices from Vanderbilt University Medical Center, each one stamped with numbers that seemed to grow larger every month. Her mother, Patricia, sat in the living room, watching an old episode of The Price is Right, her vacant stare a painful reminder of how Alzheimer's had stolen the vibrant woman who had raised Rebecca alone after her father's death. Rebecca rubbed her tired eyes and calculated the numbers for the 3rd time. Even with her full-time job as a night shift nurse at Nashville General Hospital and her weekend shifts at a private care facility, she was still $3,200 short of covering this month's expenses. The mortgage on the small house she'd bought specifically to care for her mother was 2 months behind, and the specialized memory care medication cost $800 a month that insurance refused to cover. Her phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor. "Rebecca, I know you're off tonight, but we're short-staffed. Can you come in? Double time." She stared at the message, knowing her body was already running on fumes. She'd worked 14 days straight, catching maybe 4 hours of sleep between shifts. But the money, she needed every penny she could get. "I'll be there in an hour," she typed back. Patricia looked up from the television, her eyes momentarily focusing. "Rebecca, is that you, sweetheart?" "Yes, Mom, it's me." Rebecca knelt beside her mother's chair, taking her frail hands in her own. "I have to go to work for a little while, but I'll be back in the morning." "Work? But it's nighttime. You should be sleeping." "I know, Mom. But we need the money for your medicine, remember?" Patricia's expression clouded with confusion again. "Medicine? Am I sick?" Rebecca's heart broke a little more, as it did every day. "Just rest, okay? Mrs. Henderson next door will check on you." Across town, in a cramped apartment in Antioch, Tommy Mitchell sat on the edge of his bed, acoustic guitar in his lap, trying to tune strings that desperately needed replacing. At 19, he carried the weight of responsibility that most people twice his age couldn't handle. His younger siblings, 12-year-old Lucy and 14-year-old Kevin, were supposed to be his priority, but the stack of overdue bills on his dresser told a different story. The electricity had been shut off 2 days ago, and they were living on candlelight and the weak glow of his phone's flashlight. Lucy was sleeping fitfully on the couch, having given up her bed to Kevin, who was running a fever they couldn't afford to have checked by a doctor. The free clinic had a 3-week waiting list, and the emergency room meant a bill they'd never be able to pay. Tommy's fingers moved across the guitar strings, playing the melody he'd been working on for months. The song was good, really good, and he knew it. Several local venues had shown interest in booking him, but every time he got close to a breakthrough, reality crashed down on him. He couldn't afford the gas money to drive to auditions, couldn't leave Lucy and Kevin alone for the hours it would take to play gigs, and couldn't risk the inconsistent income that came with pursuing music. His phone showed 17 missed calls from the collection agency trying to recover the debt from their parents' funeral costs. $8,000 for 2 simple services, an amount that seemed impossible when his part-time job at the warehouse paid barely above minimum wage. The insurance payout had been a joke, barely enough to cover a month's rent. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Tommy set down the guitar and peered through the peephole, seeing Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor. "Tommy," she whispered when he cracked the door open. "I brought some soup for the children, and—" She pressed a $20 bill into his hand. "For the electricity. Mrs. Chen, I can't. You take it. My husband and we remember being young with no help. You pay it back when you can." The kindness in her weathered face almost brought tears to Tommy's eyes. "Thank you," he managed. Meanwhile, in a different part of Nashville, Eleanor Rodriguez was finishing her third shift of the day. At 28, she moved with the efficient grace of someone who had learned to maximize every moment. Her first job was cleaning office buildings from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. Her second was working lunch service at a family restaurant from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And her third was stocking shelves at a grocery store from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. The constant fear of deportation shadowed every aspect of her life. She'd overstayed her tourist visa 6 years ago, unable to return to Mexico, where her sick mother and 2 younger brothers depended on the money she sent home every month. The $400 she managed to wire to Guadalajara kept her family fed and paid for her mother's diabetes medication, but it left Elena living on the absolute margins of survival. She shared a studio apartment with 3 other undocumented women, sleeping in shifts on 2 twin mattresses. Her English was functional but heavily accented, limiting her job options to places where desperate employers were willing to pay cash under the table. Every siren, every knock at the door, every unexpected change in routine sent adrenaline coursing through her system. Tonight, as she walked to the bus stop after her grocery store shift, Elena noticed the increased police presence downtown. Immigration raids had been happening more frequently, and the Latino community was on edge. Her phone showed a text from her mother. "Misha, the doctor says I need to see a specialist. The medicine isn't working." Elena stared at the message, calculating impossible numbers in her head. A specialist in Mexico would cost at least $300, money she didn't have and couldn't afford to take away from her brother's school expenses. Back downtown, James Peterson sat in his luxury car, one of the few possessions he hadn't lost yet, parked outside the building that had once housed his thriving investment firm. 6 months ago, he'd discovered that his business partner of 15 years had been running an elaborate Ponzi scheme, using their legitimate investment business as a front. When the FBI raided their offices, James lost everything: his reputation, his clients' trust, his savings, and his family. His wife, Caroline, had filed for divorce the day after his assets were frozen. Their 2 teenage children barely spoke to him, believing the media narrative that painted him as complicit in the fraud. The legal fees alone had consumed what little money he could access, and his lawyer had made it clear that even if he was eventually cleared of criminal charges, the civil lawsuits from defrauded investors would leave him bankrupt for decades. At 51, James felt like he was starting over from less than zero. The shame was the hardest part, walking through Nashville and seeing the judgment in people's eyes, knowing that his face had been on the front page of the Tennessean with the headline, "Local investment firm bilks retirees out of millions." He'd been living in a cheap motel for 3 weeks, his once pristine appearance now showing the strain of constant stress and sleepless nights. His blood pressure medication was running low, and his doctor had recommended he see a cardiologist after his last EKG showed irregularities, but his health insurance had been cancelled when his business assets were frozen. The rain intensified as James sat in his car, watching the building where he'd once employed 12 people, where he'd helped families plan for retirement and children's college educations. Now those same families were struggling to recover their life savings, and he was powerless to help them. Meanwhile, Daniel Crawford had given up on finding dry shelter and was walking through the alley behind the Ryman Auditorium when he heard the sound of a car engine struggling to turn over. Through the rain, he could see a figure hunched over the open hood of a black pickup truck, steam rising from the engine. Daniel hesitated. His experiences with random encounters on the street had taught him to be cautious, especially late at night in unfamiliar areas. But something about the person's posture, defeated, frustrated but not aggressive, made him approach. "Engine trouble?" Daniel called out, raising his voice over the rain. The man looked up, and Daniel saw a face he didn't immediately recognize, weathered but kind, with concerned eyes and graying hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. He was well dressed in jeans and a button-down shirt that were now soaked through. "Yeah, she just died on me. Won't turn over at all." The man's voice carried the distinctive drawl of rural Texas, though Daniel couldn't place why that seemed familiar. Daniel moved closer, his military training kicking in despite his current circumstances. "Mind if I take a look? I used to work on vehicles in the service." The stranger stepped back, gesturing to the engine. "I'd appreciate that. I'm supposed to be somewhere, and my phone died about an hour ago." Daniel examined the engine by the dim light of a nearby street lamp, his experienced eyes quickly identifying the problem. "Looks like your alternator belt snapped. See here?" He pointed to the frayed remains of the belt hanging loose. "That's why your battery died and your engine overheated. Can it be fixed tonight?" Daniel shook his head. "Not without a replacement belt and some tools, but I know a 24-hour service station about 8 blocks from here. They should have what you need." The stranger looked at the rain, then at Daniel. "I hate to ask, but would you mind showing me the way? I'm not from around here and everything looks different in the dark." Daniel studied the man's face, seeing genuine concern rather than the wariness that most people showed him. There was something trustworthy about his demeanor, something that reminded Daniel of the officers he'd served under who had earned his respect through their actions rather than their rank. "Sure," Daniel said. "It's quite a walk in this weather, though." "I don't mind the rain if you don't." As they began walking, Daniel found himself making conversation, something he rarely did with strangers anymore. "You visiting Nashville?" "I was supposed to play a private event tonight. Small venue, just a favor for a friend's charity fundraiser. Now I'm going to be really late." The man chuckled ruefully. "Probably should have checked the truck before I left the hotel." "You're a musician?" "Something like that. Been at it for a while." The man glanced at Daniel sideways. "What about you? You seem to know your way around engines." Daniel was quiet for a moment, debating how much to share. The man's lack of judgment, his casual acceptance of help from someone who obviously lived on the streets, made him feel safe enough to be honest. "I was a mechanic in the army. 3 tours in Afghanistan, worked on everything from Humvees to helicopters." He paused, then added quietly, "That was before things got complicated." The stranger nodded without pushing for details. "Military mechanics are the best. Had a few friends in the service." They walked in comfortable silence for a few blocks, both men lost in their own thoughts. The rain had settled into a steady drizzle, and the streets were largely empty except for the occasional taxi or late-night reveler heading home from the bars. "Can I ask you something?" the stranger said as they turned onto Broadway. "Sure. Why'd you stop to help? Most people." He gestured vaguely at Daniel's appearance, not unkindly but acknowledging the obvious. Daniel considered the question seriously. "I guess because you looked like you needed help, and I know what that feels like. Plus, helping someone else, it makes me feel useful again, like maybe I'm still worth something." The stranger stopped walking and looked directly at Daniel. "You're absolutely worth something. Don't let anyone tell you different." There was something in his tone that made Daniel believe him, a sincerity that cut through the casual cruelty he'd become accustomed to from most people who saw him as just another homeless person. They reached the service station, a brightly lit oasis in the dark, wet night. The stranger went inside to arrange for emergency roadside service, while Daniel waited under the canopy, grateful to be out of the rain for a few minutes. When the man returned, he had a cup of hot coffee in each hand. "Thought you might be cold," he said, offering one to Daniel. The coffee was perfect, hot, strong, and exactly what Daniel needed after hours in the rain. "Thank you," he said, meaning it more than the stranger could know. "The tow truck will meet us back at my truck in about 20 minutes. They'll have a new belt and can fix it on the spot." The man sipped his coffee. "I owe you big time for this. What's your name?" Daniel Crawford." "Well, Daniel Crawford, I'm George Strait." He extended his hand. Daniel shook it, the name not immediately registering. "Nice to meet you, George." George smiled, seemingly pleased that Daniel didn't recognize him. "The pleasure's all mine. How long have you been in Nashville?" "About 3 years. Came here after things fell apart back home in Ohio." Daniel found himself opening up in a way he hadn't in months. Nashville seemed like a place where people came to start over. It can be. Sometimes it takes longer than we'd like, but it happens. George finished his coffee. "Ready to head back?" The walk back to the truck gave them more time to talk. George asked about Daniel's military service, showing genuine interest and understanding. Daniel found himself sharing stories he hadn't told anyone, about the friends he'd lost, the guilt that followed him home, the slow descent into drinking that had cost him his marriage, his job, and eventually his home. "The hardest part," Daniel said, as they approached the alley where George's truck was parked, "is feeling invisible, like you don't matter to anyone anymore." George was quiet for a long moment. "You matter, Daniel. What you did tonight, helping a complete stranger in the rain, that matters. That's who you really are, not whatever circumstances brought you to this point." The tow truck was already waiting when they arrived, the driver efficiently replacing the alternator belt while George and Daniel watched from inside the service vehicle to stay dry. George paid the substantial emergency service fee without hesitation, and soon his truck was running smoothly again. "Daniel," George said as he prepared to leave, "I want you to have this." He pulled out his wallet and extracted several $20 bills, more money than Daniel had seen in weeks. Daniel's first instinct was to refuse. "I didn't help you for money. I know you didn't. That's exactly why I want you to have it." George pressed the bills into Daniel's reluctant hands. "Get yourself a decent meal and a dry place to sleep tonight." And Daniel, "Yeah? This isn't charity. This is one person helping another, the same way you helped me. There's a difference." George climbed into his truck, then rolled down the window. "Take care of yourself, Daniel Crawford. I have a feeling our paths will cross again." Daniel watched the truck disappear into the night, still not entirely sure what had just happened. He looked down at the money in his hands. 6 20s, enough for a motel room, a hot shower, and several good meals. But more than the money, it was the way George had treated him that stayed with him. For the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at him and seen a person worth knowing, worth helping, worth treating with dignity. As Daniel walked toward a nearby motel, he felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. Unknown to Daniel, the stranger he'd helped was one of country music's biggest legends, a man whose songs had topped charts for decades and whose name was known around the world. But in that alley, in the rain, George Strait had simply been a man who needed help, and Daniel Crawford had been the person willing to give it. Neither man could have predicted how that simple act of kindness would set in motion a series of events that would change not only their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. Daniel woke up in a real bed for the first time in 3 weeks, the morning sunlight streaming through clean windows of the modest motel room. The hot shower he'd taken the night before had been almost overwhelming. The feeling of being truly clean, of washing away weeks of accumulated grime and exhaustion. He'd fallen asleep almost immediately, his body finally relaxing completely for the first time since he'd committed to getting sober. His stomach growled as he checked the time. 8:47 a.m. The money George had given him was still on the nightstand, 5 20s remaining after paying for the room. Daniel counted it again, still barely believing the previous night had been real. $100 was more than he usually saw in a month of panhandling and odd jobs. He dressed in his cleanest clothes and walked to a nearby diner, the kind of place where truckers and construction workers grab breakfast before their shifts. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and tired feet, didn't seem to judge his appearance as she poured his coffee. "What can I get you, hon?" Daniel studied the menu, remembering what it felt like to have choices. "The breakfast special, please. Eggs over easy, wheat toast, and bacon." "Coming right up." As he waited for his food, Daniel reflected on the conversation he'd had with George. Something about the man had seemed familiar beyond just his Texas accent. There had been a quality of presence, of someone accustomed to being recognized but comfortable with anonymity. Daniel made a mental note to ask around. Nashville was a small town when it came to the music industry. His phone, a basic flip model he'd managed to hold onto, buzzed with a text from Mike Rodriguez, a day laborer who sometimes shared information about construction jobs that paid cash. "Danny, there's work at a renovation site downtown. $12 an hour, cash daily. Ask for Pete Martinez at 414 Commerce Street." Daniel finished his breakfast and walked toward downtown Nashville, feeling more energetic than he had in weeks. The honest meal, the full night's sleep, and the shower had reminded his body what normal felt like. The work would be good for him. Physical labor had always helped quiet the noise in his head. Meanwhile, across town, Rebecca Williams was ending her double shift at Nashville General Hospital, her eyes burning from exhaustion and the fluorescent lights. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight, and her supervisor had just asked her to stay for another 4 hours to cover for a nurse who'd called in sick. "Rebecca, I know you're tired, but you're the only one certified for the cardiac unit," Dr. Harrison pleaded, "just until the afternoon shift arrives." Rebecca looked at her phone. 7 missed calls from Mrs. Henderson, her neighbor who was watching her mother. Each call made her anxiety spike higher. "I really need to get home to my mom," Rebecca said, struggling to keep the desperation out of her voice. 2 hours, just 2 more hours, and I'll make sure you get comp time." Rebecca nodded reluctantly, knowing she needed every cent. As Dr. Harrison walked away, she called Mrs. Henderson back. "Rebecca, thank goodness, your mother. She wandered out of the house around 6 this morning. I found her 3 blocks away in her nightgown, completely confused. She didn't recognize me at all." Rebecca's heart sank. The wandering was getting worse, which meant her mother would need more intensive care soon. Care that Rebecca couldn't afford and couldn't provide while working multiple jobs. Is she okay now? "She's fine physically, but Rebecca, I think it's time to consider more professional help. This could have been dangerous." After hanging up, Rebecca sat in the hospital break room and did the math again. Professional memory care facilities in Nashville cost between $4,000 and $6,000 per month. Even if she worked every available hour, she was still thousands short of being able to provide the level of care her mother needed. Her phone buzzed with a text from the mortgage company. "Final notice. Payment must be received within 72 hours to avoid foreclosure proceedings." Rebecca put her head in her hands, feeling the weight of impossible choices. Keep working impossible hours and risk her mother's safety, or find residential care she couldn't afford and lose the house anyway. Across town, Tommy Mitchell was at the warehouse where he worked part-time, loading boxes onto trucks for $10, $50 an hour. His manager, a decent man named Frank Williams, had been understanding about Tommy's need for flexible hours, But even flexibility couldn't solve the fundamental problem. There weren't enough hours in the day to earn what his family needed. During his lunch break, Tommy called the power company to arrange a payment plan for their past due electricity bill. "Mr. Mitchell, your account shows a balance of $387. We can restore service today if you can pay at least $200 up front." Tommy looked at his wallet, which contained $43 and some change. "What about a payment plan?" "We can arrange monthly payments, but service restoration requires the upfront payment." "I understand. Let me call you back." Tommy hung up and immediately called the 3 music venues that had expressed interest in booking him. The first 2 didn't answer, but the third, the Blue Note, picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Tommy, we've been trying to reach you. We have an opening this Friday night, acoustic set, 3 hours. It pays $150. Tommy's heart leaped. "I'll take it." "Great. Just bring your guitar and be ready to play some covers along with your originals. Crowd gets going around 9. After hanging up, Tommy felt a surge of hope. $150 would cover the electricity restoration and leave money for groceries. He just had to find someone to watch Lucy and Kevin for the evening. Maybe Mrs. Chen would help again. Elena Rodriguez was in the middle of her second job, working the lunch rush at Mama Rosa's Italian restaurant, when she received news that changed everything. The restaurant owner, Mr. DeMarco, called her into the small office behind the kitchen. "Elena, I need to talk to you." His expression was grave, and Elena's stomach immediately knotted with anxiety. "Did I do something wrong?" No, you're a good worker. But there was an immigration raid at the construction site down the street yesterday. 3 of the workers there gave them information about other businesses in the area." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "I can't have any problems with the authorities." "I'm sorry, but I can't employ you anymore." Elena felt the familiar chill of fear wash over her. "Please, Mr. DeMarco, I need this job. My family, I know, and I'm sorry, but I have my own family to protect." He handed her an envelope. "This is your pay through today, plus a little extra. I wish things were different." Elena took the envelope and walked out of the restaurant in a daze. She'd just lost 1/3 of her income, and finding another cash job would be difficult with immigration enforcement becoming more aggressive. The $200 in the envelope would cover her share of rent for 2 weeks, but after that, she sat on a bus stop bench and called her mother in Mexico. "Mija, how are you?" "I'm okay, Mama. How are you feeling?" "Not good. The doctor says I need to see the specialist soon," or her mother's voice trailed off. "I'll send the money, Mama. Don't worry." But as Elena hung up, she had no idea how she'd keep that promise. James Peterson was at the Nashville Public Library, using their free internet to search for jobs. His laptop had been repossessed along with most of his other assets, and the library's computers were his only connection to potential employment. The problem was that his name was now synonymous with financial fraud in Nashville. Even though he hadn't been charged with any crimes, the association was enough to make him unemployable in the financial sector. He'd applied for dozens of jobs, everything from insurance sales to retail management, but background checks consistently eliminated him from consideration. His phone rang, and he recognized the number of his attorney. "James, I have an update on the case. The FBI has cleared you of any criminal wrongdoing. They have evidence that you had no knowledge of your partner's scheme." James felt a moment of relief. "That's good news." "Yes, but there's a complication. The civil lawsuits are still moving forward. Even though you're not criminally liable, the plaintiff's attorneys are arguing that you should have known what was happening. They're seeking damages that could total everything you have left, which is basically nothing." "Unfortunately, yes. I'm going to recommend that you consider bankruptcy. It would protect you from the civil judgments and give you a fresh start." After hanging up, James stared at the computer screen, feeling the weight of starting over at 51 with destroyed credit, no assets, and a reputation that would follow him for years. Back at the construction site where Daniel was working, Pete Martinez was impressed with the new hire's skill and work ethic. "You know what you're doing," Pete said as they took a break. "Where'd you learn construction?" "Military, mostly. We did a lot of rebuilding in Afghanistan, schools, hospitals, infrastructure." Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. "Turns out those skills transfer pretty well. You looking for steady work? I could use someone reliable." Daniel felt another spark of hope. "Absolutely. It's not glamorous and the pay's not great, but it's honest work. 40 hours a week, $14 an hour, and I pay weekly." Daniel quickly calculated 560s a week was more money than he'd seen in months. It was enough for a cheap apartment, regular meals, and maybe even a chance to start rebuilding his life. "When do I start?" "You already did. Be here Monday at 7 a.m. As Daniel walked home that evening, home to another night in a motel room, but hopefully the last night without a permanent address, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him answer. "Daniel, this is George Strait. We met last night." Daniel stopped walking. "George, how did you get my number?" "You gave it to Pete Martinez when you applied for work today. Pete's an old friend of mine. He called to tell me about the new guy who impressed him. Turns out it was you." Daniel was confused. "Pete knows you." George laughed. "Daniel, do you know who I am?" "You said you were a musician named George Strait." "I am, but I'm also, well, let me put it this way. I've been singing country music for about 40 years, had a few hit songs." Daniel stopped in front of a record store and looked at the posters in the window. Suddenly he saw it. A concert poster featuring the face of the man who had helped him the night before. George Strait, the king of country music. "Oh my God," Daniel said quietly. "Yeah, that's usually the reaction. But here's the thing, Daniel. Last night, you helped me not because of who I am professionally, but because I needed help. That means everything to me." Daniel was still processing the information. "I helped George Strait. The actual George Strait. And George Strait wants to help you back. Pete tells me you're looking for a place to live. I know a guy who owns some affordable apartments in East Nashville. Good neighborhood, safe, and he gives breaks to veterans." "George, I can't." "Yes, you can, and you will, because that's what people do for each other." George paused. "There's something else. I'm putting together a benefit concert next month for homeless veterans. I'd like you to help me with it, consulting on what services these guys really need, what would actually make a difference. There's a small salary involved, enough to supplement your construction work." Daniel felt overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this?" "Because 24 hours ago, I was stuck in the rain with a broken-down truck, and a man who had every reason to walk past me stopped to help. That man was you, Daniel. And if you're willing to help a stranger in the rain, imagine what you could do with some real support behind you." That evening, George arranged for Daniel to meet with Tom Bradley, the apartment owner he'd mentioned. Tom, a veteran himself, understood Daniel's situation immediately. "Military housing loan got me started in real estate 30 years ago," Tom explained, as he showed Daniel a clean, one-bedroom apartment in a converted house. "I try to help other veterans when I can. First month's rent is $600, but if you're working steady and staying clean, we can work out a deal." Daniel looked around the apartment, small but clean, with a kitchenette, a bathroom with a working shower, and windows that let in real sunlight. It was the first place he'd been able to call home in 3 years. "I'll take it," he said. "Good. George vouched for you, and that's enough for me. You can move in this weekend." As Daniel signed the lease agreement, he realized that a single act of kindness, helping a stranger with car trouble, had set in motion a series of events that was giving him back his life. But he also sensed that this was just the beginning. George had mentioned a benefit concert, meaningful work, and the chance to help other people in situations similar to his own. For the first time since returning from Afghanistan, Daniel felt like he had a purpose beyond just surviving each day. Meanwhile, Rebecca Williams was finally driving home from her extended hospital shift, her hands shaking from exhaustion and too much caffeine. She'd made it through the additional hours, but barely. At one point, she'd nearly made a medication error that could have seriously harmed a patient, the kind of mistake that happened when people pushed their bodies beyond safe limits. Her phone rang as she pulled into her driveway. The caller ID showed Nashville General Hospital. "Rebecca, this is Dr. Harrison. I wanted to thank you for staying late today, and I have some news. The hospital is starting a new program for employees with family medical situations. It's called the Compassionate Care Fund. It provides financial assistance and flexible scheduling for staff members who are dealing with significant family health issues." Rebecca felt a glimmer of hope. What kind of assistance? It varies case by case, but it could include help with medical bills, referrals to affordable care facilities, and modified schedules that allow for caregiving responsibilities. "I'd like to recommend you for the program. Dr. Harrison, that would mean everything. You're a good nurse, Rebecca, and a good person. We want to help you succeed, not burn out. Come see me Monday morning and we'll start the application process." As Rebecca hung up, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized was there. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was hope. Real, tangible hope for a sustainable path forward. She walked into her house to find her mother sitting quietly at the kitchen table, looking more lucid than she had in days. "Rebecca, how was work?" "It was long, Mom, but things might be getting better." Patricia smiled, and for a moment, Rebecca saw glimpses of the strong, independent woman who had raised her. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I know I don't always remember to say it, but I'm proud of the woman you've become." Rebecca hugged her mother tightly, feeling grateful for these moments of clarity, however brief they might be. Tommy Mitchell spent the evening preparing for his Friday night gig at the Blue Note, tuning his guitar and practicing the songs he planned to perform. Lucy and Kevin were both feeling better. Kevin's fever had broken, and Lucy had volunteered to help with his homework while Tommy worked. Mrs. Chen had offered to stay with them during the gig, refusing Tommy's offer of payment. "You help others when you can," she'd said simply. "That's how community works." As Tommy ran through his original song one more time, he felt the familiar surge of passion that music brought him. For 3 hours on Friday night, he wouldn't be a struggling guardian trying to keep his family afloat. He'd be an artist, sharing the music that came from the deepest part of his soul. Elena Rodriguez spent the evening at a community center where other undocumented workers gathered to share information about jobs and safe places to live. The loss of her restaurant job was a significant blow, but she wasn't giving up. "There's cleaning work at some office buildings downtown," one woman told her. "It's night work, but it pays cash." "I'll take it," Elena said immediately. "And there's a church that provides free ESL classes and job training. They don't ask questions about status." Elena wrote down the address. Every skill she could learn, every connection she could make, increased her chances of survival and her ability to support her family in Mexico. James Peterson was back in his motel room, looking at bankruptcy paperwork his attorney had sent over. The legal language was daunting, but the message was clear. He could eliminate his debts and start over, but the process would take months and would require him to surrender what little he had left. His phone rang. A call from his daughter, Emma. "Dad, I've been thinking about what happened and I think I was too harsh. I know you didn't know what your partner was doing." James felt tears in his eyes. "Emmy, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. You're my father and I love you. Mum may not understand, but I do. You're a good man who got caught up in someone else's scheme." "Thank you," James managed. "That means more than you know. I want to help." I can't give you money, college is expensive, but I can help you look for jobs, maybe even move in with you once you get an apartment. We can figure this out together." For the first time since his world had collapsed, James felt like he wasn't completely alone. As the evening settled over Nashville, 5 lives that had been struggling in isolation were beginning to find threads of connection and hope. Daniel Crawford was moving from the streets into an apartment. Rebecca Williams had discovered a support system at her workplace. Tommy Mitchell was preparing for a performance that could open new doors. Elena Rodriguez was adapting to a setback with characteristic resilience, and James Peterson was rebuilding a relationship with his daughter. None of them knew it yet, but their paths were about to intersect in ways that would transform not just their individual struggles, but their understanding of what community and mutual support could accomplish. George Strait, meanwhile, was in his hotel room making phone calls and planning something that would bring all these stories together in unexpected ways. The following Monday morning, Daniel Crawford showed up at the construction site at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, and wearing work boots he'd bought over the weekend with part of his first day's pay. The steady income from Pete Martinez's crew, combined with the affordable apartment George had helped him find, had given him something he'd almost forgotten existed: stability. "You're eager," Pete observed as Daniel helped unload materials from the truck. "Just grateful for the opportunity," Daniel replied, and he meant it. 3 days of regular meals, hot showers, and sleeping in a real bed had done wonders for his physical and mental state. The tremors from alcohol withdrawal had finally stopped, and for the first time in months, he felt clear-headed and strong. "George mentioned you might be interested in some additional work," Pete said, as they carried drywall into the building they were renovating. "He's organizing some kind of benefit concert and needs someone who understands what homeless veterans actually need." Daniel nodded. He mentioned it. "I'd like to help, but I'm not sure what I could contribute." "Are you kidding? You lived it for 3 years. You know exactly what works and what doesn't work." Pete paused in his lifting. "Plus, George doesn't ask for help from just anyone. If he's bringing you in on this, it means he sees something in you." That afternoon, Daniel met George at a coffee shop in the Gulch, the same upscale neighborhood where Rebecca Williams was struggling to pay her mother's medical bills. George had chosen a quiet corner table and was already waiting when Daniel arrived, looking like any other successful businessman in his jeans and casual shirt. "How's the apartment working out?" George asked as Daniel sat down. "It's perfect. I can't thank you enough." "You can thank me by helping make this benefit concert something special." George pulled out a manila folder. "I've been working on this for months, but I want to make sure we're addressing real needs, not just what sounds good to donors." George opened the folder to reveal plans for what he was calling Home Free Nashville, a concert featuring multiple country music stars, with proceeds going to programs for homeless veterans. But this wasn't going to be a typical charity event. Most benefit concerts raise money and write a check to existing organizations, George explained. "That's fine, but I want to do something more direct. I want to create new programs based on what actually works." Daniel studied the preliminary plans. "What did you have in mind?" "Housing first, obviously, but also job training, mental health support, and something most programs don't offer: ongoing mentorship. Pair each veteran with someone who's been through the process successfully." Daniel was impressed by the thoughtfulness of the approach. "That could actually work. The mentorship especially. I think a lot of guys give up because they feel like no one understands what they're going through." "Exactly. And that's where you come in. I want you to help design the program, identify partners, and eventually run the mentorship component." Daniel looked up from the papers. "George, I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm not qualified to run a program like this. You're the most qualified person I know. You've been where these guys are, and you're finding your way out." That's exactly the experience they need to see. George explained that the concert was scheduled for 6 weeks away, with performers already committed and tickets going on sale the following week. I need someone to work with me on this full-time for the next month and a half. The pay is $1,000 a week, plus you'll keep your construction job for stability. Daniel felt overwhelmed by the opportunity and the trust George was showing in him. I don't know what to say. Say yes, and say you'll help me make sure this actually changes lives instead of just making donors feel good. While Daniel and George were planning their benefit concert, Rebecca Williams was meeting with Dr. Harrison about the Compassionate Care Fund program at Nashville General Hospital. The meeting was taking place in Dr. Harrison's office, a small but comfortable space overlooking the hospital's main courtyard. The fund can provide up to $2,000 per month in financial assistance for qualified employees, Dr. Harrison explained. It's designed to help with medical expenses, elder care costs, and other family-related financial burdens that might otherwise force good employees to leave the profession. Rebecca felt a surge of hope. What are the requirements? You have to be a full-time employee in good standing, which you are. You have to demonstrate financial need, which your situation clearly meets, and you have to commit to staying with the hospital for at least 2 years after receiving assistance. That's not a problem. I love working here, Dr. Harrison smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. There's also a flexible scheduling component. We can arrange for you to work 3 12-hour shifts instead of scattered shorter shifts, giving you more consecutive time at home with your mother. Rebecca calculated quickly in her head. 3 12-hour shifts would still give her full-time status and benefits, but would mean 4 days a week at home. That would make a huge difference. The program also includes access to a social worker who specializes in elder care planning. She can help you navigate Medicare, find affordable care options, and plan for your mother's changing needs. For the first time in months, Rebecca felt like she had a path forward that didn't involve choosing between her mother's well-being and her own survival. Dr. Harrison, how is this program funded? It seems too good to be true. It's a combination of hospital funds and private donations. Actually, there's a benefit concert being organized to raise additional money for programs like this. Some country music star is putting it together, George Strait, I think. Rebecca's heart skipped. George Strait is raising money for hospital employees? Not specifically, but the proceeds are going to several programs that support working families dealing with medical crises. Your situation is exactly the kind of thing the fund was designed to address. Meanwhile, across town at the Blue Note, Tommy Mitchell was finishing his sound check for his Friday night performance. The venue was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 50 seats, but the acoustic setup was perfect for his style, and the staff had been welcoming and professional. "You've got a good voice," said the sound engineer, a woman in her 30s with short grey hair and kind eyes. "Your original songs are really strong." "Thank you. I've been working on them for a while." "I'm Linda Peterson, by the way. I work with several venues around town." She handed him a business card. "If tonight goes well, I might have some other opportunities for you." Tommy looked at the card, which listed Linda as a talent coordinator for multiple Nashville venues. That would be incredible. The music business is tough, especially when you're starting out. But talent recognizes talent, and you've got something special. Linda paused. "Can I ask, are you doing this full-time?" Tommy hesitated, unsure how much to share. "Not exactly. I'm supporting my 2 younger siblings, so I have to work other jobs too." Linda's expression softened. "That's tough. How old are your siblings?" 12 and 14. "Our parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. And you became their guardian." "Yeah, it's been challenging." Linda was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her phone. "There's someone I think you should meet. My boss is putting together a benefit concert for working families in crisis situations. It sounds like you might qualify for some of the programs they're funding." Tommy felt a familiar mix of hope and wariness. What kind of programs? Childcare assistance, educational support, emergency financial help, things designed to help people in exactly your situation. Linda scrolled through her contacts. His name is George Strait, and he's looking for local musicians to participate in the concert. The pay isn't huge, but it's good, and the networking opportunities could be significant. George Strait wants to meet me. If tonight goes well, absolutely. He's specifically interested in featuring musicians who are dealing with real-world challenges, not just established stars. Tommy felt a surge of nervous excitement. A meeting with George Strait could change everything, not just his music career, but his family's entire financial situation. Elena Rodriguez was working her new night shift cleaning office buildings, a job that paid $10 an hour in cash and allowed her to maintain her morning cleaning job as well. The work was solitary and physically demanding, but it was safe and reliable income. She was cleaning the offices of a small non-profit organization called Nashville Community Support when she noticed flyers on the break room table advertising free ESL classes and job training programs. One flyer caught her attention. Home Free Nashville, supporting working families in crisis. Elena read the flyer carefully, her English comprehension improving with each paragraph. The program was designed to help people who were working but still struggling financially. It offered job training, language classes, and something called Pathway to Legal Status Assistance. The last item made Elena's heart race. She'd heard rumors of programs that helped undocumented workers find legal ways to stay in the country, but she'd never found anything concrete. Most of the information she'd received had come from people who didn't really know the facts, and she'd been afraid to ask official sources for fear of deportation. Elena took a photo of the flyer with her phone and continued working, her mind racing with possibilities. If there was a legitimate way to regularize her status, it would change everything. She could get better jobs, wouldn't have to live in constant fear, and could even visit her family in Mexico without being unable to return. The next morning, after finishing her cleaning shift, Elena called the number on the flyer. Nashville Community Support, this is Jennifer. Hello, I saw a flyer about ESL classes and job training. Are these real programs? Absolutely. We offer several different programs depending on what you need. Are you interested in English classes or job training, or both? Both, please. And the flyer mentioned something about legal status assistance. Jennifer's voice remained professional and welcoming. We work with immigration attorneys who provide pro bono consultations for people who might qualify for various legal pathways. It's completely confidential, and there's no cost for the initial consultation. Elena felt tears in her eyes. When can I come in? We have orientation sessions every Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. No appointment necessary, just come in and we'll get you started. Thank you, Elena managed. Of course. And just so you know, these programs are being expanded thanks to funding from a benefit concert that's happening next month. So we're able to help more people than ever before. After hanging up, Elena sat in her car outside the office building and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. For 6 years, she'd lived in the shadows, afraid to hope for anything beyond basic survival. Now there was a possibility of something more. James Peterson was at a job interview for a position as a financial consultant with a small firm that specialized in helping people recover from bankruptcy and financial fraud. It was a significant step down from his previous role as an investment firm owner, but it was legitimate work in his field, and the owner of the firm had specifically sought him out. "I'll be honest with you, James," said Robert Chen, the firm's owner. "I'm interested in hiring you precisely because of what you've been through. Our clients need someone who understands financial devastation from personal experience." James was surprised by the directness of the approach. "Most people see my situation as a liability. Most people haven't been where our clients are. You have." Robert leaned forward. "I've done my research." The FBI cleared you? Your former clients speak highly of your integrity, and your expertise is exactly what we need. The question is whether you're ready to help other people navigate the same kind of crisis you're facing. James considered the offer. The salary was modest, $45,000 a year plus commission, but it was honest work that would allow him to use his skills to help people rather than just make money. "I'm interested," James said, "but I should tell you that I'm filing for bankruptcy myself. I want to be completely transparent." "I know. That's not a problem. It's actually an asset in this line of work. Our clients trust people who've been where they are." Robert explained that the firm had recently received a significant grant to expand their services to working families facing financial crises. "We're partnering with a program called Home Free Nashville. Have you heard of it?" James shook his head. "It's a comprehensive support program for people dealing with various kinds of life challenges: homelessness, elder care, family crises, financial problems. We provide the financial counseling component." James felt a sense of purpose stirring that he hadn't experienced since his business had collapsed. "That sounds like meaningful work." "It is. And James, your daughter called me yesterday. She wanted to put in a good word for you. She said you raised her to help people and that this job would give you the chance to do that again." James felt overwhelmed with gratitude toward Emma. Even in his darkest moment, she was supporting him and believing in his ability to rebuild. That evening, Daniel Crawford attended his first planning meeting for Home Free Nashville, held in a conference room at George Strait's management company. The room was filled with representatives from various service organizations, city officials, and several other country music stars who were participating in the benefit concert. George introduced Daniel to the group as the person who's going to make sure we actually help people instead of just raising money. Daniel felt intimidated by the room full of successful, influential people, but George's confidence in him helped him find his voice. "I think the most important thing to understand," Daniel said when George asked him to speak, "is that homelessness is usually the result of multiple problems happening at the same time. It's not just about housing, it's about mental health, job skills, family support, addiction recovery, legal issues, all of these things interconnected." A woman from the mayor's office nodded. "What do you think would make the biggest difference?" "Treating people like individuals instead of statistics. Everyone's situation is different, and cookie-cutter programs don't work." Daniel paused, gaining confidence. "And follow-up. Most programs help people get housing or jobs, but then they're on their own. What people need is ongoing support as they rebuild their lives." George smiled at Daniel from across the table. "That's exactly why we're structuring this program the way we are. Comprehensive support, individualized approaches, and long-term mentorship." After the meeting, George walked Daniel to his car. "How do you feel about speaking to groups?" "Terrified, honestly." "Good. That means you care about getting it right." George paused. "I want you to speak at the concert. Tell your story. Explain why this program matters. People need to hear from someone who's lived it." Daniel felt a surge of anxiety. "George, I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You're more ready than you think. And Daniel, your story matters. Not just the hard parts, but the recovery, the hope, the fact that people can change their lives with the right support." As Daniel drove home to his apartment, a phrase that still amazed him, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just 2 weeks. He had stable housing, steady work, a purpose beyond survival, and the trust of people who believed in his ability to help others. But more than that, he was beginning to understand that his experience of homelessness and recovery wasn't just a personal struggle. It was preparation for something larger, a way to bridge the gap between people who had never faced these challenges and people who were currently living them. The benefit concert was still a month away, but Daniel could see that it was going to be more than just a fundraising event. It was going to be a community coming together to address real problems with real solutions, and somehow he was going to be at the center of it. Rebecca Williams was starting her new 3-day work schedule, and the difference was already remarkable. Instead of being constantly exhausted and scattered across multiple shifts, she had concentrated work periods and substantial time at home with her mother. The social worker provided through the Compassionate Care Fund had visited that morning to assess Patricia's needs and discuss care options. Instead of feeling overwhelmed and alone, Rebecca now had professional guidance and financial support to navigate her mother's declining condition. "Your mother is still in the moderate stage of Alzheimer's," the social worker Maria Santos had explained. "With the right support structure, she can probably remain at home for another year or two before needing residential care." "What kind of support structure?" "Adult daycare 3 days a week while you're working, a part-time home health aide for the other days, and safety modifications to the house. The Compassionate Care Fund can cover most of these costs." For the first time in months, Rebecca felt like her mother could receive proper care without Rebecca having to sacrifice her own health and career. Tommy Mitchell's performance at the Blue Note had gone better than he'd dared to hope. The audience had been enthusiastic, and he'd sold out of the demo CDs he'd brought. More importantly, Linda Peterson had introduced him to several other venue owners, leading to bookings for the next 3 weekends. "There's someone else I want you to meet," Linda had said after his set. "George Strait is holding auditions next week for local musicians to participate in a benefit concert. I think you'd be perfect." Now Tommy was preparing for that audition, practicing the songs he'd chosen and trying to manage his excitement and nervousness. The audition could lead to exposure that would transform his music career, but he was also intrigued by what Linda had told him about the programs the benefit concert would fund. "It's specifically designed to help working families in crisis," she'd explained, "people who are employed but still struggling financially. The programs include childcare assistance, educational support, emergency financial help, exactly what you need." Elena Rodriguez had attended her first orientation session at Nashville Community Support and was amazed by what she'd learned. The organization offered not just ESL classes and job training, but comprehensive support for immigrants navigating life in the United States. "We help people understand their rights, connect with legal resources, find better employment, and access social services," the program coordinator had explained. "Everything we do is confidential, and we don't ask about documentation status." Eleanor had signed up for intermediate ESL classes, job training in office administration, and a consultation with an immigration attorney. For the first time since arriving in the United States, she felt like she had allies and advocates. James Peterson had started his new job at Robert Chen's financial consulting firm and was surprised by how fulfilling the work felt. Instead of managing investments for wealthy clients, he was helping people understand bankruptcy law, negotiate with creditors, and develop realistic plans for financial recovery. His first client had been a nurse whose mother's medical bills had destroyed her credit. His second had been a young man supporting his siblings after their parents' death. His third had been an immigrant woman whose documentation status had limited her employment options. "Each case is different," Robert had explained, "but the common thread is that these are good people facing impossible circumstances. Our job is to help them find a path forward." James discovered that his own experience with financial catastrophe made him uniquely effective at providing both practical guidance and emotional support to clients who felt ashamed and overwhelmed by their situations. As the week progressed, the lives of these 5 people, Daniel, Rebecca, Tommy, Elena, and James, continued to improve in small but significant ways. They didn't know it yet, but their paths were converging toward a single event that would bring them together and demonstrate the power of community support and mutual aid. George Strait's benefit concert was becoming more than just a fundraising event. It was turning into a model for how a community could come together to address real problems with comprehensive, thoughtful solutions. And at the center of it all was Daniel Crawford, a homeless veteran whose simple act of kindness on a rainy night had set in motion a series of events that would change not just his own life, but the lives of everyone around him. 3 weeks before the Home Free Nashville benefit concert, Daniel Crawford found himself in a position he never could have imagined. Sitting in a planning meeting with some of country music's biggest stars, city officials, and non-profit leaders, being asked for his opinion on how to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in charitable donations. "The question," said George Strait, addressing the room of 25 people gathered around the conference table, "is whether we focus on quantity or quality. Do we help a lot of people a little bit? Or do we help fewer people more comprehensively?" Daniel had been thinking about this exact question for days. "If I can share something from personal experience," he said, finding his voice stronger than he'd expected, "most programs help people take one step forward, but then they're on their own. What made the difference for me wasn't just getting an apartment, it was having ongoing support as I figured out how to rebuild my life." Maria Santos, the social worker who had been helping Rebecca Williams, nodded in agreement. "That's consistent with what we see in elder care situations. Families need comprehensive, coordinated support, not just financial assistance." Robert Chen, who had recently hired James Peterson, added, "The same is true with financial recovery. People need education, ongoing counseling, and long-term planning, not just debt relief." George looked around the table. "So, we're talking about creating a system, not just funding individual programs." "Exactly," Daniel said. "And that system needs to connect people who are struggling with people who've been through similar situations successfully." Jennifer Martinez, the coordinator from Nashville Community Support, who had been working with Elena Rodriguez, raised her hand. "We're seeing that peer support is often more effective than professional services alone. When people see someone who's been where they are and made it through, it gives them hope and practical guidance." George smiled. "That's what Daniel's been telling me from day one. People need to see that recovery is possible." The meeting continued for 2 more hours, with the group designing what was essentially a new model for community support. Instead of traditional charity that created dependence, they were creating a network that empowered people to help themselves and each other. "We'll call it the Nashville Network," George announced. "Not just because of the city, but because it's about networking, connecting people with resources, opportunities, and each other." Daniel was put in charge of the veteran services component, but his role was expanding beyond that. George had asked him to coordinate the entire peer mentorship program, matching people who had overcome various challenges with people currently facing similar situations. "You've got a gift for this," George told Daniel after the meeting. "You understand that helping people isn't about feeling superior to them, it's about recognizing that we're all just people trying to figure life out." Meanwhile, Rebecca Williams was experiencing the difference that comprehensive support could make. With the financial assistance from the Compassionate Care Fund, she'd been able to arrange for her mother to attend adult daycare 3 days a week, while Rebecca worked her hospital shifts. A part-time home health aide came in on the other days, giving Rebecca time to rest and handle other responsibilities. But the real game changer had been the peer support group that Maria Santos had connected her with. Other adult children caring for parents with dementia. The group met twice a week and included people from all different backgrounds and economic situations. "The thing nobody tells you," said Carol, a woman whose father had Alzheimer's, "is that you grieve for your parent while they're still alive. You grieve for the person they used to be, the relationship you used to have, the future you thought you'd have together." Rebecca had nodded, finally understanding why she'd been feeling so sad and angry despite the increased support she was receiving. I feel guilty for being frustrated with her when she doesn't remember things. That's normal, said David, whose wife had early onset dementia. The person you're caring for isn't the same person who raised you or married you. It's okay to mourn that loss while still loving the person they are now. The group also provided practical advice that Rebecca couldn't get anywhere else. Which medical equipment was actually helpful versus which was a waste of money. How to modify a home for safety without making it feel institutional. How to maintain your own mental health while providing care for someone else. This group probably saves me more than the financial assistance does, Rebecca told Maria Santos. Just knowing I'm not alone in this makes everything more manageable. Maria smiled. That's exactly why we're expanding the peer support component of all our programs. Professional services are important, but nothing replaces the understanding of someone who's been exactly where you are. Tommy Mitchell was discovering the same thing through his involvement with the benefit concert. After his successful audition, George had not only invited him to perform at the concert, but had also connected him with other young musicians who were balancing artistic careers with family responsibilities. The music industry is hard enough when you're just taking care of yourself, said Ashley Rodriguez, a singer-songwriter who was supporting her disabled brother. When you're responsible for other people, it feels almost impossible. How do you make it work? Tommy asked. They were sitting in a coffee shop in East Nashville, part of a monthly meetup that George had helped organize for local musicians facing family challenges. You have to be realistic about your timeline, Ashley explained. I used to think I had to make it big immediately or give up completely. Now I understand that I can build a career gradually while still meeting my responsibilities. Marcus Williams, a guitarist whose parents were undocumented and couldn't work legally, nodded in agreement. I started playing private parties, corporate events, wedding receptions, stuff that pays well and has predictable schedules. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps me in music. The key, added Jennifer Chen, a fiddle player who homeschooled her younger sister, is building relationships with people who understand your situation. Regular gigs are better than big breaks if they help you create stability. Through these conversations, Tommy was learning that his struggles were not unique and that other people had found ways to pursue their artistic dreams while meeting their family obligations. More importantly, he was building a network of mutual support, people who could cover for each other during emergencies, share information about opportunities, and provide emotional support during difficult times. This is what George meant when he talked about creating a network, Ashley said. It's not just about money, it's about community. Elena Rodriguez was experiencing her own version of community building through the programs at Nashville Community Support. Her ESL classes had connected her with other immigrants facing similar challenges, and her job training program was opening doors she hadn't known existed. Your English is very good, said Ms. Patterson, her job training instructor. Have you considered office administration or customer service work? Eleanor had always thought those jobs were impossible for someone without documentation. But Ms. Patterson explained that some employers were willing to work with people who had pending legal cases or were pursuing legal status. The immigration attorney we work with has helped several program participants apply for various forms of relief, Ms. Patterson explained. Some qualify for asylum based on conditions in their home countries. Others are eligible for visas based on their work history or family situations. A few have been able to regularize their status through their U.S. citizen children. Elena's consultation with the immigration attorney had been the most hopeful conversation she'd had since arriving in the United States. The attorney, Sarah Rodriguez, had reviewed Elena's situation carefully. You've been here for 6 years. You have steady employment history. You've never been arrested, and you have U.S. citizen relatives who could potentially sponsor you, Sarah had explained. There are several potential pathways we could explore. What would that mean? It would mean you could work legally, travel to visit your family in Mexico, and eventually apply for permanent residency. The process takes time, usually several years, but you could have work authorization within a few months. Elena had felt overwhelmed with hope and fear. How much does this cost? That's the best part. The Home Free Nashville program is providing funding for immigration legal services. Your case would be handled pro bono. Elena had cried in the attorney's office, finally allowing herself to imagine a future where she wasn't constantly afraid, where she could visit her sick mother, where she could build a real life instead of just surviving day to day. James Peterson was finding his own path to recovery through his work helping other people navigate financial crises. His personal experience with financial destruction had made him uniquely effective at providing both practical guidance and emotional support to clients who felt ashamed and overwhelmed. The hardest part isn't the money, he told Robert Chen during one of their weekly check-ins. It's the shame. People feel like financial problems are a moral failing instead of just circumstances that got out of control. That's exactly why your perspective is so valuable, Robert replied. You can help them understand that financial recovery is possible and that their current situation doesn't define their worth as people. James's client load had grown quickly as word spread about his effectiveness. He was helping other people understand bankruptcy law, negotiate with creditors, and develop realistic plans for financial recovery. But more than that, he was helping them maintain their dignity and hope during the process. His relationship with his daughter Emma had continued to strengthen. She was now spending weekends with him in his small apartment, helping him research job opportunities and plan for the future. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Emma had told him the previous weekend. "You could have given up after everything that happened, but instead you're helping other people who are going through the same thing." "It gives me purpose," James had replied. "I can't undo what happened to my former clients, but I can help other people avoid the same mistakes and recover from similar situations." Emma had smiled. "That's exactly the kind of person I remember you being before everything went wrong." James was also beginning to think about his own long-term recovery. His bankruptcy would be finalized soon, clearing his debts and giving him a fresh start. Robert had offered him a partnership track at the firm, with the potential to eventually become a co-owner. For the first time since his world had collapsed, James could envision a future where he was not just surviving, but thriving. As the benefit concert approached, all 5 of these individuals found themselves involved in the event in different ways. Daniel was not only speaking at the concert, but had become the public face of the peer mentorship program. Rebecca was volunteering with the family support services component, drawing on her nursing background and her experience caring for her mother. Tommy was performing and had helped organize the participation of other local musicians. Elena was sharing her story as part of the Immigration Services outreach. And James was providing financial literacy workshops as part of the comprehensive support offerings. But beyond their individual roles in the concert, they had all become part of something larger, a network of people who had faced significant challenges and were now helping others navigate similar situations. "This is what I was hoping would happen," George told Daniel as they reviewed the final concert preparations. "Not just raising money, but creating a sustainable system where people help each other." Daniel looked around the venue where they were doing the final sound check. The concert was sold out, with over 5,000 people expected to attend. Multiple news outlets were covering the event, and there was already talk of replicating the Nashville network model in other cities. "It feels surreal," Daniel admitted. 6 weeks ago, I was living under a bridge. Now I'm helping create a program that could affect thousands of people." "That's exactly why this works," George replied. "You bring authenticity and lived experience that no professional program developer could provide. People trust you because you've been where they are." The day before the concert, Daniel received a call that brought his journey full circle. Mike Rodriguez, the day laborer who had helped him find construction work, was on the phone asking for help. "Danny, I heard about this program you're involved with. My cousin's family is about to lose their house because of medical bills. Is there anything you can do?" Daniel smiled, realizing that the network was already functioning exactly as intended. "Tell your cousin to meet me at the Nashville Community Support Office tomorrow morning. We'll figure something out." That evening, Daniel sat in his apartment, reflecting on the chain of events that had led from helping a stranger with car trouble to becoming part of a community-wide effort to address systemic problems. His phone buzzed with a text from George. "Ready for tomorrow?" Daniel looked around his small but comfortable home, thought about his steady job, his meaningful work with the Nashville network, and the sense of purpose he'd rediscovered. He was more than ready. He was grateful for the opportunity to help create something that could make a real difference in people's lives. He texted back, ready to change some lives. But what Daniel didn't fully understand yet was that the benefit concert was just the beginning. The Nashville network was about to become a model that would spread far beyond Tennessee, and his role in it was about to expand in ways he couldn't imagine. The morning of the Home Free Nashville benefit concert dawned clear and cool, with the kind of crisp October air that made Nashville feel like the center of the universe. Daniel Crawford stood in front of the bathroom mirror in his apartment, adjusting the tie that George Strait had insisted he wear for his speaking role at the concert. 6 weeks ago, Daniel had been a homeless veteran living under a bridge. Today, he was going to address 5,000 people about hope, recovery, and the power of community support. The transformation felt so dramatic that sometimes he wondered if he was dreaming. His phone rang, George calling for their traditional pre-event check-in. "How are you feeling?" George asked. "Terrified and grateful," Daniel replied honestly. "Perfect, that means you're taking it seriously." George paused. "Daniel, I want you to know that regardless of what happens today, you've already changed lives. The Nashville network is going to continue long after the concert is over, and it exists because you had the courage to help a stranger on a rainy night." "George, I still can't believe this all started because I helped you with your truck." "It started because you chose kindness when you had every reason to be bitter. That choice matters, Daniel. Tonight, you're going to help other people understand that their choices matter too." Meanwhile, across town, Rebecca Williams was getting ready for her role as a volunteer coordinator for the Family Support Services booth at the concert. Her mother, Patricia, was having one of her clearer days and had insisted on helping Rebecca get ready. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Patricia said, helping Rebecca choose jewelry. "What's this event for again?" "It's a benefit concert to raise money for programs that help families like ours," Rebecca explained patiently. "I'm volunteering because they helped us when we needed it." Patricia smiled with sudden clarity. That's how it should work. People helping each other. Rebecca hugged her mother, grateful for these moments of connection that were becoming less frequent but more precious. The adult daycare program had given Rebecca the time and energy to be more present during Patricia's lucid periods, and the peer support group had taught her to treasure these interactions instead of mourning what was lost. "I love you, Mom," Rebecca said. "I love you too, and Rebecca, I'm proud of what you're doing today. Even when I can't remember everything else, I remember that you're a good person who helps people." Tommy Mitchell was at the venue early, helping with sound checks for the local musicians who would be opening the show. His siblings, Lucy and Kevin, were with him, their first time seeing him perform outside their neighborhood. "Are you nervous?" Lucy asked as Tommy tuned his guitar. "A little, but it's the good kind of nervous." Tommy looked at his sister and brother, both of whom were healthier and happier than they'd been in months. The financial stability from his regular gigs, combined with the childcare assistance from the Nashville network, had transformed their daily lives. "Will there really be famous people here?" Kevin asked, still somewhat awed by the scale of the event. "Yeah, but the important thing isn't how famous they are. It's what we're all doing together, helping families like ours." Linda Peterson, the talent coordinator who had become Tommy's mentor, approached with a clipboard and a warm smile. "Tommy, there's someone I want you to meet. This is Marcus Johnson from the Country Music Association. He's been impressed with your performances and wants to discuss some opportunities." Tommy felt his heart race. The CMA was the most prestigious organization in country music, and Marcus Johnson was a legend in artist development. "Tommy," Marcus said, extending his hand, "I've been hearing good things about you. Not just about your music, but about your character. The way you're balancing your artistic career with family responsibilities, that's exactly the kind of person our industry needs more of." "Thank you, sir. I'd like to talk to you after the concert about some opportunities. We're developing a program specifically for talented musicians who are dealing with family situations that require stability. It's about building sustainable careers, not just chasing quick success." Tommy looked at Lucy and Kevin, who were listening with wide eyes. "That sounds perfect." Elena Rodriguez was working as a volunteer translator for the concert, helping Spanish-speaking families understand the services available through the Nashville network. It was her first time using her bilingual skills in a professional capacity, and she was amazed by how empowering it felt. "Senora Martinez," Elena said to a woman who was inquiring about immigration services, "there are attorneys here today who can help you understand your options. Everything is confidential, and the consultation is free." The woman looked skeptical. "Are you sure it's safe?" Elena understood the fear completely. "I was afraid too. But I've been working with these people for 2 months now, and they've helped me start the process of legalizing my status. They care about helping people, not causing problems." Elena's own legal case was progressing better than she dared hope. Sarah Rodriguez, the immigration attorney, had filed an asylum application based on the violence in Elena's home region of Mexico, and Elena now had work authorization while her case was pending. "The beautiful thing," Sarah had explained, "is that your years of steady employment and community involvement actually strengthen your case. You're exactly the kind of person our immigration system should be designed to help." Elena had used her new work authorization to get a job as a bilingual administrative assistant at Nashville Community Support, tripling her previous income and allowing her to send more money to her family while still supporting herself comfortably. "Mija," her mother had said during their weekly phone call, "you sound different, happier." "I am happier, Mama. I'm not afraid anymore. And I'm helping other people who are going through what I went through. That's my daughter, always thinking of others." James Peterson was setting up the financial literacy booth where he would be providing free consultations throughout the evening. His booth was positioned next to the legal aid station, creating a comprehensive resource center for families facing complex challenges. His daughter Emma was helping him arrange the materials, pamphlets about bankruptcy law, debt negotiation strategies, and long-term financial planning. "Dad, do you ever regret what happened? I mean, if your business partner hadn't been a criminal, you'd still be wealthy." James considered the question seriously. "You know what, Emmy? I don't think I do regret it. I mean, I regret that innocent people got hurt, but the person I am now, the work I'm doing, the relationship we have, none of that would have happened if I hadn't lost everything and had to rebuild." "Really? Really?" "When I was successful, I thought success was about accumulating wealth and status. Now I understand that success is about how many people you help and how much meaning you find in your work." James paused. "Plus, I never would have met Robert or learned about this community, or discovered that helping people recover from financial disaster is what I was meant to do. Emma smiled. I like this version of you better than the old version. Me too. Robert Chen arrived as they were finishing the setup. James, I have some news. The State Banking Commission wants to hire us to develop a financial literacy program for people facing foreclosure. It's a big contract, and they specifically requested you to lead the project. James felt a surge of pride and purpose. They want someone who's been through foreclosure themselves. Exactly. They're tired of programs designed by people who've never faced financial crisis. They want real-world expertise. As the afternoon progressed and concert-goers began arriving, the venue transformed into something more than an entertainment event. The resource booths were busy with families seeking help, volunteers were connecting people with services, and there was a palpable sense of community and mutual support. Daniel found himself moving between different stations, talking with families, sharing his story, and explaining how the peer mentorship program worked. Every conversation reinforced his understanding of how many people were struggling with challenges that felt insurmountable but were actually addressable with the right support. The thing people don't understand about homelessness, he told a reporter who was interviewing him, is that it's usually temporary if people get the right help. Most homeless people aren't chronically homeless. They're people who hit a rough patch and need support to get back on their feet. What made the difference for you? Having someone believe in me when I didn't believe in myself. And then being given the chance to help other people. That's what the Nashville Network is about, creating a community where people support each other through difficult times. As the sun set and the concert began, George Strait took the stage to address the crowd. "Welcome to Home Free Nashville," George said, his voice carrying clearly across the packed venue. This isn't just a concert. It's a celebration of what happens when a community comes together to solve problems. George went on to explain the Nashville Network, describing how it was designed to provide comprehensive, coordinated support for families facing various challenges. He introduced the different service components and the peer mentorship approach that made the program unique. Tonight, you're going to hear from some amazing musicians, George continued, but you're also going to hear from people who represent what this program is really about. Regular folks who faced tough times and found ways to not just survive, but thrive and help others do the same. The concert proceeded with performances from established stars, interspersed with local musicians like Tommy Mitchell, whose original song about family resilience brought many audience members to tears. But the most powerful moment came when Daniel took the stage to share his story. Standing in front of 5,000 people, he spoke about his journey from homelessness to hope, from isolation to community involvement. 6 weeks ago, I was living under a bridge, Daniel said, his voice steady despite his nervousness. I helped a stranger with car trouble because it seemed like the right thing to do. I didn't know that stranger was George Strait, and I didn't expect anything in return. The audience was completely quiet, listening intently. But that one interaction changed everything. Not because George is famous, but because he treated me like a human being worth helping. And then he did something even more important. He gave me the chance to help other people. Daniel went on to explain the peer mentorship program, describing how people who had overcome various challenges were being matched with people currently facing similar situations. The Nashville Network works because it's based on the understanding that we all have something to offer each other. The person who's homeless today might be the person who helps someone else find housing next year. The parent struggling to care for a sick child today might be the one who guides another family through the same challenge tomorrow. He concluded with a message that resonated throughout the venue. Hope isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create by helping each other. The concert raised over $300,000 for the Nashville network, but the financial success was almost secondary to the community building that happened throughout the evening. Families connected with services, volunteers signed up to help with various programs, and people began forming the informal support networks that would sustain the program long term. After the concert, as volunteers were cleaning up and participants were saying their goodbyes, George found Daniel helping a family understand the housing assistance program. "How does it feel?" George asked. Daniel looked around at the scene. Rebecca Williams coordinating with social workers to help a family access elder care resources, Tommy Mitchell exchanging contact information with other young musicians facing family responsibilities, Elena Rodriguez translating for a couple seeking immigration assistance, James Peterson explaining debt consolidation options to a family facing foreclosure. "It feels like we actually did something that matters," Daniel said. "Not just raised money, but created something that will keep helping people." "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." George smiled. "Because this is just the beginning. We've had inquiries from 12 other cities wanting to replicate the Nashville network. Are you ready to help make this a national model?" Daniel felt overwhelmed by the possibility. "You want me to help other cities create programs like this?" "I want you to lead the effort. You understand better than anyone what makes this work. The combination of practical services and peer support, the importance of treating people with dignity, the power of giving people the chance to help others." Daniel looked around the venue again, seeing the evidence of what could happen when a community came together to address real problems with comprehensive solutions. The Nashville network had grown from a simple act of kindness into a model for how society could better support people facing temporary crises. "Yes," Daniel said, "I'm ready." 3 months later, Daniel Crawford was traveling to Atlanta to help launch the second Nashville Network program. He'd been sober for 6 months, had a savings account with actual money in it, and was engaged in work that gave his life profound meaning. Rebecca Williams had become the coordinator for the Family Support Services program, using her nursing background and personal experience to help other families navigate complex medical and elder care situations. Her mother's condition had stabilized with proper care, and Rebecca had found a sustainable balance between her caregiving responsibilities and her professional life. Tommy Mitchell had signed with a record label that specialized in developing artists who needed flexible schedules and predictable income. His music was reaching wider audiences, but more importantly, his family was stable and thriving. Lucy and Kevin were both excelling in school, and Tommy was able to pursue his artistic dreams without sacrificing their well-being. Elena Rodriguez had received her work authorization and was now the bilingual services coordinator for Nashville Community Support. She was helping other immigrants navigate the legal system while pursuing her own path to permanent residency. For the first time in years, she was planning a trip to Mexico to visit her mother, knowing she could return to continue building her life in Nashville. James Peterson had become a partner in Robert Chen's firm and was developing financial literacy programs for implementation in cities across the Southeast. His relationship with his daughter was stronger than ever, and he'd found a sense of purpose in helping other people recover from financial catastrophe. All 5 of their lives had been transformed. But perhaps more importantly, they had become part of a sustainable system for helping others facing similar challenges. The Nashville Network had demonstrated that communities could address complex social problems through comprehensive, coordinated support that treated people with dignity and recognized their potential for recovery and contribution. The ripple effects of Daniel's simple act of kindness on a rainy night had spread far beyond anything he could have imagined. But as he boarded the plane to Atlanta, carrying materials for launching the next Nashville Network program, Daniel understood that the real magic hadn't been in helping a stranger. It had been in creating a system where everyone could be both a helper and someone who receives help. The Nashville network was proof that hope wasn't just an individual experience. It was something communities could create together, one person at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one life at a time. And it all started with a homeless veteran who chose to help a stranger with car trouble on a rainy night in Music City.